Science fiction and video games go hand in hand and have done so since the beginning. The great thing about space, apart from being the final frontier, is that it's completely pitch black, making programming backgrounds with super early video game dev equipment a no-brainer. The development shortcut would eventually give way to science fiction becoming the most enduring aesthetic in video games, stretching across every single genre, but particularly touching on the RPG. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are the 10 best sci-fi RPGs of all time. Number 10. Shadowrun Hong Kong. One of the founding fathers of the science fiction RPG back in the tabletop days, Shadowrun may have struggled to break into the mainstream like its contemporaries, but the games that have been made from the system have often been excellent, and Shadowrun Hong Kong is the best of the bunch. Shadowrun Hong Kong tells the story of a street rat being called to Hong Kong by their estranged foster father. When the meeting turns out to be an ambush by the HKPD, the player must team up with friends old and new to find out what the hell is actually going on. While it's built on the same foundation as the other Shadowrun games, Returns and Dragonfall, Hong Kong presents a version of the formula that's so fine-tuned and polished that the other two games pale in comparison. The grid-style cover-based combat has never been smoother or more interesting, and the characters you meet on your journey are the best in the whole franchise. That's not even mentioning the character creation and progression systems, which offer endless replayability. If you love isometric CRPGs, then Shadowrun Hong Kong cannot come recommended enough. Number 9. Xenogears. The original PlayStation found itself the home of some of the greatest JRPGs and RPGs ever created, where even the ones that fell under the radar of mainstream attention had something to draw the eye of the curious. And the cult classic predecessor to Xenoblade Chronicles, Xenogears certainly is one of those. Considered by hardcore JRPG fans to be an exemplar of the entire genre, and for good reason, Xenogears mostly flew under the radar of the Western JRPG market at the time due to the crime of not being Final Fantasy VII. But those who did play it know it as one of the most satisfyingly complex RPGs that was released on a console famous for all-time great RPGs. While not as character-focused as Xenoblade, Xenogears' story is much more heavily steeped in philosophy and intrigue, giving it an appeal all its own. And the combat, whether in the boots-on-the-ground sections or in the pilot seat of a giant robot, is some of the most fun you'll ever have in turn-based combat. If you're into hardcore classic JRPGs, then Xenogears really should be considered required reading. Number 8. Colony Ship, a post-Earth role-playing game. Even though this one's only a year old, we feel pretty confident in naming Colony Ship one of the all-time greats in the halls of science fiction RPG history. Colony Ship takes place on an eponymous colony ship, taking a civilization of humans from Earth to its destination of Proxima Centauri. This trip takes 400 years, and the unlucky son of a gun you play as has been born right smack dab in the middle of that trip. Born too late to remember Earth and too early to know Proxima, you have no choice but to figure out your place in the sprawling space-borne civilization that sprouted up on the colony ship. What makes Colony Ship one of the greats is the world building. The way that Iron Tower Studios has accounted for every world building question as to how human society would develop on a sprawling but fragile spaceship is nothing short of impressive. Add to that some brutal but fair gameplay indicative of the genre, and you get a real winner. Number 7. Wasteland 3. With its third entry, Wasteland has finally become the successor to the original Fallout duology that it was always meant to be. The previous entries got close, but Wasteland 3 is when the series has truly hit its stride. Wasteland 3 sees your character traveling up north when things back home get a bit too shooty for your liking. Hoping to find some peace and quiet in the snowy northern US, you're instead dragged into yet more wasteland politics, featuring brutal warlords, desperate survivors, and a lot of death. What makes Wasteland 3 so good is how it perfectly balances between being accessible with being hardcore. The combat system has never been smoother or more solidly built. But the choice system is where the real hardcore stuff comes into play, as you have to make constant, desperate choices to survive in the harsh environment as well as get as many people to the end credits as possible. And some of those choices really can come back to bite you later. often in ways you won't see coming until it's left multiple beloved characters as greasy smears on the wall. If you miss the old school Fallout but wish the UI was less terrible, then Wasteland 3 is the gem you've been waiting for. Number 6. NieR Automata. Yoko Taro has made some good games. Platinum Games has made some really good games, but NieR Automata is, on no uncertain terms, the masterpiece of both. NieR Automata is a masterclass in science fiction storytelling, an emotional, thought-provoking tale of existentialism and the nature and value of life. You play as 2B, the latest in a long line of android soldiers designed to retake Earth from a planet-spanning army of robots. She and her partner 9S are sent to Earth to investigate a disturbing new development. The robots seem to be developing real sentience. They're not ready, though, for what they find. NieR Automata's story will twist your brain into funny balloon animal shapes, and then, while you're busy trying to disentangle your brain, reach into your chest and break your heart into tiny little pieces. And you'll keep playing, though, because it's also sporting one of the most satisfying combat systems in gaming history. The frenetic pacing that Platinum Games have become famous for reaches its logical endpoint with Automata, resulting in one of the best RPGs and most fun RPGs to play since Kingdom Hearts 2. If you haven't played NieR Automata yet, then you really should fix that ASAP. Number 5. Mass Effect 2. After all these years, BioWare is still trying to rebottle the lightning that was Mass Effect 2. Considered by many fans to be the masterpiece of the entire company, only in competition with Dragon Age Origins, literally the most ambitious game they've ever put out. To give you an idea, Mass Effect 2 is what got the series' popularity really rolling. After being lovingly introduced to the business end of a planet's orbit by the Collectors, Commander Shepard wakes up 2 years later to the news that all their friends are gone. The Council has covered up the Reapers, the guys who brought them back are the human supremacist group Cerberus, and the Collectors are now rounding up entire human colonies. Concluding that this is some BS, Shepard decides to work with Cerberus to take down the Collectors and save the lost colonists. Everything that made the first Mass Effect fun has been fine-tuned like a Swiss watch, while everything that held it back has either been replaced with something better or removed outright. The cover system has been improved through careful level geography to provide the most fun you can get out of this otherwise stale gameplay format, and the characters are some of the greatest in gaming history. Mass Effect 2 was what truly put the series and BioWare as a company on the map. Number 4. System Shock 2. The spiritual precursor to BioShock, System Shock 2 is one of the most beloved science fiction RPGs ever made. If you follow any hardcore CRPG lovers on YouTube or anywhere else, then you've heard them mention this game at some point. System Shock 2 is one of those hardcore CRPGs that even hardcore CRPG fans will tell you to be cautious when you approach. It's the kind where you need a guide just to start the damn game, because while there's no truly correct player build to start off with, by God, there are tons of incorrect ones. If you don't know what you're doing, you can start off this game without knowing how to fire a damn pistol. But that's just the kind of freedom that System Shock 2 offers, letting you make your own mistakes and not giving so much as a single pop-up that goes, "Are you sure?" Whereas other sci-fi games go for thoughtful philosophy or epic space opera, System Shock 2 is a straight-up horror story, so you've been forewarned before you hop into this one if you haven't tried it yet. Number 3. Deus Ex. The immersive sim is a subgenre of RPG that's infamously difficult to make and even harder to make right. Being a subgenre where player choice is put at the forefront more than any other kind of RPG, you essentially have to plan for literally everything the player could possibly think of doing, and either counter it or give them a gameplay path for it. Do it right, and you're guaranteed to see yourself into the minds of an entire generation of gamers. Do it wrong, and you just come off as clumsy and unfocused. Not only does Deus Ex fall into the former category, it's arguably the greatest immersive sim to ever do it. What makes Deus Ex the best immersive sim out there is that it is the platonic idea of the subgenre, where every action you take has been anticipated and planned for. You're given a single task when the mission begins, and it's up to you to figure out how to get there. And unlike System Shock 2, every skill available to you can get you to that objective. There's no such thing as a dead-end character build. If you can't get to the objective under the power you have, then that's your own fault. Add on to that one of the most multi-layered and politically relevant storylines in gaming history, and you get a game for the history books. Number 2, Fallout New Vegas. Fallout 3 was a just okay game with a decent engine, so when Bethesda loaned that engine and the Fallout license to Obsidian, a studio comprised of many who worked on the original Fallout duology, the result proved exactly what Fallout 3 could have been in the right hands, the masterpiece of the franchise, Fallout New Vegas. When a courier is shot in the head by a well-dressed scumbag named Benny over one of their packages, they decide to make the trek to the jewel of the Mojave Wasteland, New Vegas, to get to the bottom of why. It's a simple premise that spins out into one of the most complicated and well-told stories in gaming. What makes New Vegas so fun and replayable is that there's not a single boring quest. Every eccentric weirdo you talk to sends you to either another eccentric weirdo or an entire section of the map that you weren't even aware of in your last 15 playthroughs. That is to say, no 2 playthroughs of Fallout New Vegas are alike. The series is yet to reach the heights demonstrated by New Vegas, heights that make its constant instability on current hardware more than worth the headaches. Number 1, Cyberpunk 2077. What started as one of the most reviled games of its year has become easily the greatest work of science fiction in RPG history. And thank goodness, me and the author of this list agree on this one. Everything that makes the entries on this list great is exemplified in the current build of Cyberpunk 2077. The combat is absolutely immaculate, offering a wide variety of approaches to taking out the baddies of Night City, each one feeling smooth as butter and satisfying as hell. The story and world building are both as tight as an airlock, presenting one of the most living and breathing settings in gaming history, with the tragically beautiful Night City and all of the broken, desperate souls caught up in its downpour. You're given a lot to juggle as the game goes on, but at no point does it feel overwhelming. As tragic as Cyberpunk's narrative is, it manages to make being a criminal in Night City seem like the coolest thing in the world, which just makes the points where it is tragic hit you all the harder. If you, like John Tibbetts who wrote this list, or me who didn't play Cyberpunk for an entire year after it came out, stayed away for so long because of that awful first year, then take this as your cue to give it a try. Cyberpunk 2077 is one of the best games ever made, and it's the pinnacle of video game science fiction, particularly when we're talking RPGs.